everyone. How's it going? How are you enjoying Growth Summit so far? Woo! Woos and yes. Well, I hope to be able to add to that enthusiasm. So, over the next 2 hours, we'll go through about 97 slides, and hope you brought your caffeine. So, as Rich said, Mark Barry is my name. I'm the Managing Director and Vice President of Sales for HubSpot in EMEA. Over the next 35 or 40 minutes, I'm going to be talking about the transition from growth at all costs to hopefully something better. And shortly, Megan, Vice President of Marketing at AirSwift, is going to join me to talk through some of these ideas. So let me just get my slides organized. That's us. So let's start with something which is probably pretty obvious. AI is now, it's not next, and it's moving really, really, really fast. To put that speed into context, it took about 4 years for the internet to reach 100 million users. ChatGPT did that in 2 months, and the first version is already old news. What's cutting edge today will be mainstream in a year. And so if you just imagine that for a second, imagine you just fell asleep for a year and you woke up a year from now, like your job would be more or less completely different. And like the Industrial Revolution of the 1700s, or the infrastructure advancements made in the 1800s, or the introduction of computing in the 1900s, Gen AI is another revolution. And the piece that I think is on everyone's minds is how different it feels from other tech revolutions and other tech advancements. It is, as I said, much faster. And we're currently a little preoccupied with why that might be a bad thing. But the optimist in me said that this is wonderful, actually. We now have the opportunity of decoupling headcount investment from business growth. And so this is more than a kind of simple shift in perspective. It is that proverbial paradigm shift in how businesses should perceive and should pursue growth. And the winners will leverage data and automation and artificial intelligence, moving away from being reactive to being much more proactive, and to drive sustainable growth where this is customer growth and customer value rather than growth at all costs. And so AI is for sure part of that revolution, but let me introduce you to the 5 M's. The 5 M's are mastery in sales, machine, meaning, metabolize, bear with me on that one, and market. And so sales is something we all do every day. Those little kind of micro negotiations, like trying to convince our kids of the benefit of tidying their room, or appealing to your partner's sense of judgment of the outsized reward that will be delivered by emptying the dishwasher, in exchange maybe for making the dinner, or in my case, maybe ordering the dinner. The art of science and selling has evolved too. And a couple of basic but important shifts have happened, over time. A pretty obvious one, I think, really is the highlighting the importance of value over cost. That is something that has been pervasive through sales for many, many years. But others more recent, like just how buyers have changed and how people like to buy. The idea that selling or thinking of sales as just simply hitting targets is not good enough. It's certainly important to hit those targets, but not at all costs, especially not for all deals, because not all deals are good deals. They might, feel good at the time, but if the thing that your customer bought was not the thing they needed, then there's no value for them, and there is no value for you. And so we still think about selling as showing up and selling and appealing to older and very serious people. But if nothing else, competition and the internet have put increased power in the hands of the buyer, and that's where it should be. They're paying for the value, after all. But selling has shifted away from how we like to sell and how buyers like to buy. And we sometimes forget that buyers are people too. They're consumers. You know, they book their holidays on booking.com, they buy stuff on Amazon, they use OpenTable to make a reservation at a restaurant, or they use Netflix to binge watch stuff, you know, rather than just kind of waiting for us to come on the telly. And they do this because the old way is hassle. And because the way we do it now allows for almost complete control and, really critically, minimal human interaction. So why should these consumers, who are key decision makers and buyers, buy any differently? Well, okay, for sure, that's maybe an oversimplification. Of course, they have a duty of care for due diligence. They're probably not the only person making the decision, and they probably don't have total control over the scope or the budget. But either way, they still want convenience. And the ability to research a buying decision in advance gives them greater context and control than they ever had. And so sellers really need to understand this, and sales processes need to adapt to this and leverage data and insights to understand how buyers want to buy. It's not binary, it's not self-serve or sold, but it's probably some combination of digital and human interaction. It's not a new thing for us to rely on automation either. We've been automating since the invention of the printing press, and automation, you know, generally makes things easier, makes things faster, and if it's done really well, it makes things cheaper. And AI has kind of changed the way that we think about automation for a few reasons. Like, such is the rate of advancement in computing that we don't think about automation and AI at all. In fact, in common usage, the only time we think about it is when it stops working. Like, the shift from consciously engaging with automation to do things like that, you know, setting up your reports at the start of the morning to run through the rest of the day, that shift now to, you know, the reports just run themselves and the machine serves you up that thing unconsciously. And so it's really just super annoying when it doesn't work. But the thing that many, maybe even most people associate with automation, and particularly with AI, is redundancy, in the will my job be redundant sense of the word. And while, you know, AI in the way we know it today, since the emergence of ChatGPT, is novel and maybe even scary, machine learning has been around for decades. It's been doing your reports, it's been finishing your sentences in text messaging, you know, it's been serving you up suggestions of things to watch or things to buy. And the wave of mass layoffs that has been kind of heralded by the advent of AI as we know it today, it hasn't happened. And it won't. You know, it's gradually making work easier. It's removing toilsome stuff. It has the potential to make people better at the work they're doing, or perhaps the job they wish they could do if they just had more time back. And so the printing press, all the way back then, allowed the person writing the copy to spend more time writing the copy. And if they weren't interested in writing the copy, maybe they could operate the printing press, or maybe become a salesperson and sell printing presses. So no matter how much I really want you to get out of bed every day and come to work as your best self, you know, no amount of motivation from me is going to do as much as purpose. Fewer things motivate people than having a purpose. And sure, if you're in sales, money is important. You know, career advancement is probably important, but having purpose or meaning in your work is as important in your life, is as important in work as in your life, especially as the line between work and life starts to blur, and, you know, things like work-life balance become more something like work-life blend. And so articulating your company's mission, like helping millions of organizations grow better, is really important. But to really finish the swing, you need to be able to help relate what the people in your company do to actually help achieve the company's goals. And that might sound like a really, really trivial thing, but without an appreciation of that, then what is the purpose of me being here? And purpose and connection to company mission is understood as being one of the key signals of strong engagement, which is good for your company because it signals intent to stay, and good for your company because it signals the fact that people want to be there to do their very best work. metabolize. I said bear with me on this one. So raise your hand if you've hired somebody this year. It's kind of pointless, I can't see you anyway, so I'll assume folks are raising your hand. Raise your hand if you have been surprised by the number of people who've joined your company in the last few years. I think that was fewer than the first, actually. That was not the intended response. But anyway, thanks so much for participating. There's a chance that your company or your team size has doubled or maybe even tripled in the last few years. In the US, tech companies across industry grew 92% between 2019 and 2022. And smaller companies reported even stronger growth, larger growth than that, naturally enough. And that's a lot of change to absorb. The rate at which organizations metabolize growth is slower than the rate of headcount growth. Let me just say that again. The rate at which organizations metabolize growth, make sense of that growth, is slower than the rate of headcount growth itself. And so I don't have a good stat to share with you, but I'm sure, like me, many of you have spent loads and loads of time helping those new hires get onboarded at the expense of your own time. And then those, let's say, salespeople, those new salespeople become the go-to resource for the next wave of salespeople. And so increasingly adding shallower and shallower layers of institutional knowledge and depth. And that is, it really hits home when things get tough. Like in the last couple of years, as the wave of kind of like tech order taking, which was powered by the pandemic or the massive shift to online, as that wave has started to go out, rather than being left with white sandy beaches, the Strand was strewn with like shopping trolleys and traffic cones. It was an ugly picture. And part of the reason for that was because we probably weren't as good as we thought we were at selling. We were great at order taking. We probably didn't really know what contributed to our success, and we probably were not intentional about enabling people to be really good at their job. And maybe it's a combination of those factors. But what's really key here is that we have to be intentional about enablement and onboarding. And importantly, where data plays a role here is we have to be intentional about identifying the things that add value, and maybe the things that don't add value anymore but might be sacred within your organization, and shift away from those things so we can move to more profitable growth. Before you start to consider, how to reach your audience, you ask yourself, do you know your audience? Do you know your market? What's your ideal customer profile? Who buys your product or service? And why do they choose you? And the chances are that your market or your target audience have shifted as you've scaled. If the last 4 years since the pandemic have shown us nothing else, some of the things we once took for granted have changed. And perhaps, as you've scaled, you've opened up new audiences because you've become more available online, or you've opened up new audiences because you've offered a new product or service and you've created additional TAM. But the ability to really know your audience has never been more fluid than it is today. And this is true regardless of your industry. Even take, commodities, the most basic staple commodity. Let me use the example of the ham sandwich, the humble banana sandwich, the humble banana sandwich. The humble banana sandwich is my go-to snack. And my weekly shop these days takes me to 3 different grocery outlets for the ingredients of my banana sandwich. The first is the bread. I like sourdough bread. I work in tech. I like sourdough bread. And especially since working from home, I started to experiment with creating my own and then realized that was a bad idea. But I found, the crusty, crunchy sourdough that I really like. And now that's a staple ingredient. And there's one place where I go to get that. And then take, the butter. You have to have butter in a banana sandwich, by the way. The 3 ingredients: bread, butter, banana. Take the butter. Dairy in Ireland is a big deal, right? And your choices around dairy or your tea or your milk or your butter say a lot about you as a person. Like, the butter you choose is akin to the bank you bank with or the political party that you support. And it's it is that way because it's the thing that your mommy and daddy did. And you don't choose changes, because hassle. So butter is the same all the way through. But the banana, the key ingredient to all of this. As a father, I care about responsible food production. I care about my children's future. And so, naturally, the banana in my sandwich is organic. So my organic banana, my butter from another place, my sourdough bread, that's effort for me. But it's huge effort for the retailers who want to keep me buying stuff from them and maybe buying other stuff from them. But what does my banana sandwich, really stretching out this banana sandwich thing, what does my banana sandwich, say about me as a consumer? I mentioned already it's an organic banana sandwich, so does buying, organic bananas mean that I'm more likely to travel by rail than by air? Does the fact that it's sourdough bread suggest that I work in tech? And so because I work in tech, I might have a higher salary, and I might feel the social pressure of peers to make good choices. Maybe both of those things. Does it also mean that because I work in tech, I have an acoustic guitar and I need, wall hooks to hang the guitar so it can be seen on Zoom in the background? And then, when I'm on Zoom, is my digital camera high definition? And, when was the last time I changed the Ring LED that I use to, light up this beautiful visage every time I'm on there? 4 years ago, pre-pandemic, my go-to snack of choice was cereal. Things change. So, to snack on some of those things that change, please join me in welcoming Megan Tu, VP of Marketing at AirSwift, to come and talk through this a little bit further. Hi.
Hi.
How are you?
I'm doing well. How are you?
I feel like I kind of labored the banana thing a bit.
You did, but I like how you worked that snack on that. That was good.
Thank you very much. Okay. All right, Megan, before we start, maybe you can tell us a little bit about what you do.
Sure. My name is Megan Tu. I'm the VP of Marketing at AirSwift. I've been there for 15 years. When I started the marketing department about 13 years ago, there were 2 of us, and marketing was seen as party planning, promotional products, really not a lot of strategy or budget or anything involved, and now we have about 14 people in 6 different countries.
Amazing. Mm-hmm. And welcome to Manchester. So we're going to talk a little bit about these 5 M's, and starting with the kind of mastery in sales. Your sales team, how are they aligned? Are they aligned to one unified approach? Have they changed over time? What are they focusing on?
We use something at AirSwift called value-focused engagement, and or VFE for short. But basically what that does is identifies clients' drivers, objectives, and challenges. And I'm sure there's other methodologies like this out on the market, but the difference is we're coming at selling from a solutions-oriented approach and really customizing that to the client. So if you can identify what drives them, what motivates them, what their objectives are, and recruitment in our case, what's going to happen if they make this hire? Is it going to make them look good? Are they going to be able to complete their project on time? And what challenges do they have in overcoming that? You're going to be a lot more successful coming at it at that angle.
What motivated you to make the change to go in that direction?
Well, we discovered our salespeople were doing all different kinds of crazy things. Even just the company bio of who we are and what we do is different. And so this is a very streamlined approach, and we have fields in our CRM where they have to input that information or they can't save it as an opportunity. So it's just been really ingrained in our organization of this is how we do it, and we've found it to be very effective.
Okay, thank you. When you think about AI and automation, what in the industry are you seeing in terms of AI and automation? How does it affect your business and how you guys transform?
Yeah, so AirSwift is a energy recruitment staffing business, so probably should have started with that. But AI has been making a wave in recruitment, but I think of it as like a self-driving car. You might be okay driving it on the highway, right? But I don't want it driving me in the city. I think you still need a person to intervene. So recruitment's much the same way. It can help you cut down the time it takes from reviewing job applications and resumes, and then you still need a human touch element to vet, the details that aren't outlined in the resume, finding the candidate's drivers, objectives, and challenges of why they're looking for a role, and then you mirror the two, combine the two together, and it gives you a better output. But it is saving us a lot of time because our recruiters receive hundreds of job applications for each job that they have. So it does save a lot of time in creating short lists.
And so the idea that the promise of AI is to boost productivity and performance rather than necessarily creating redundancy or cutting jobs or whatever. How are you seeing that play through?
Yeah, the same. We have what we call delivery centers. So we have people in different regions of the world that are focused on sourcing and recruiting. So they are identifying that short list. I guess think of it in 3 stages. So what one recruiter used to do, all of this feeding through the job applications, screening, calling candidates. We now have AI and delivery center resourcers who do that, but then you still need the final piece of the recruiter.
Okay, thank you. All right, so if you think about the idea of kind of having a purpose, we're in a fast-paced world. We've stayed true to our original vision, or have you become bogged down with administrative tasks? Like, how do you at AirSwift maintain and create purpose and really that drive for people to be part of what you're doing?
So there's 2 really good books that talk about this. Has anybody heard of Simon Sinek, Start With Why? Yes. So think of a target, and basically he talks about how, what, and why is in the center. So you really want to get to that center bullseye of if you can identify why people do what they do and what their purpose is, then that's where the magic happens, and that's how you can really motivate people. And same at an organizational level. Why are you doing what you're doing? Yes, to make money, but that's not going to motivate people to the degree you need. So that's a good book I'd highly recommend. And another one is The 4 Disciplines of Execution. Anyone heard of that one? Not you? Yeah? Okay. It's hard to see. Sorry. So The 4 Disciplines of Execution is a leadership book that talks about how to get things done, basically. But the first discipline is called Start with Wildly Important Goals, or WIGs for short. And what these are, they're 2 or 3 of your big picture things that you want to happen in a year. And this keeps you out of the whirlwind, which is what, emails, texts, Teams messages, everything else that gets thrown at you on a day-to-day basis. So you should be spending a majority of your time on those WIGs and avoid getting sucked into the whirlwind. And if you can keep that at the forefront and have it really clear in your organization, very visible, then people are focused on those and know what they should be doing.
So the WIGs are the things that keep you away from distraction.
Right.
Okay, keep you on task.
Yeah.
Okay.
And then you should be having a compelling scoreboard so everyone knows where we are against this goal, how we're doing. It should be at every team meeting you have. Everyone in your organization should be able to just spit these off at the drop of a hat.
Okay, great, thank you. Okay, so if you, we talked a little bit about metabolizing growth and, how the rate at which we metabolize growth in an organization is slower than the rate at which we typically add, people and headcount. And so how can companies not only keep up with the swift changes, but also effectively transform and change, their organization?
I think the WIGs that I just talked about are a key thing. So you should have very clear strategic goals and things that you're trying to achieve, and those should be top of mind, like I mentioned. And the other thing is innovate. So how can you try new things, push the envelope, embrace new technology? And then the last one would be maximize your productivity. So how can you do more with less? And technology is a big piece of that. And how can that'll increase your output, but decrease your costs. And the delivery centers I just talked about was one way that we've done that to lower our costs and increase our efficiencies.
Right. I mean, one of the things that I've found in my experience over the last few years at HubSpot and previously in my previous organization, that idea that people can come and just know how to do the job is it is, I mean, it sounds silly, of course, to say it out loud, but we operated at a level of scale like that when we had this massive wave of growth across the industry, right? And so you're adding 2 or 3 times as many people to your organization and relying on them being smart and capable to just kind of figure it out, right? Like, we got that wrong, I think. So as we settle back into this idea of maybe more normal rates of growth, the thing that's really landed with me is the needs to be super intentional about purpose, but also role clarity. Like, what am I actually here to do? There's a thing that fast-paced, high-growth companies do, which can be a mistake at the beginning, is when you hire these really smart generalist people, is you give them lots and lots of autonomy. And even at HubSpot, we say, be autonomous, and that's great. It's a really, it's a really noble thing to expect from folks. But as an 8,000 person company, being autonomous means something quite a lot different than when you're a 100-person company or a 150 person company, particularly if you have people doing similar roles in dozens or maybe hundreds of people doing the same thing. And so that idea that as you evolve and you scale and you try and metabolize that growth, the context changes as well, right? The way you speak to people, or the way you describe what's expected of people needs to be super intentional, right?
Yeah, and I think they need to know how they connect back to that bigger purpose. So why is what I'm doing matter? Why does it matter to my team's goal, to the organizational goal? And if you can really draw that all the way down, you're going to find people are more motivated.
Right. Just going back to machine for a second, and the idea of AI, aside from what it means for you, for your company, how has that come across from your customers?
So we're developing our own AI in-house, which has taken longer than we would have liked, and there's a lot of products off the shelf we could have gone with instead, but we really wanted to own our own data and really make sure that this process was perfect for our clients. And we have 2 sets of clients, so people who are looking for jobs and then the clients who need the jobs filled. So we're hoping they're going to be happy with the end product, but it is still very new. But it does save our recruiters time as well. Like I mentioned, the AI matching between jobs and resumes. But we're developing this with them in mind so that we can provide a perfect solution for them that no one else has.
Okay, and maybe a question about AirSwift's own strategy. You see this also presumably as a differentiator. You're creating your own product, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay, thank you. Okay, so on market and thinking about identifying your target market, how do you identify who your market is, and has that changed?
So Joe mentioned Mark Ritson, so he will tell you that the holy trinity in marketing is segmentation, positioning, and targeting. And that is so important. If you haven't done the work to divide out the mass market and segment out who is your target market, what do they like, what do they think about, what are their buying habits, that's the first step. And then positioning is step number 2. And Joe touched on that earlier this morning, but how are you getting your product or service into the top of your clients' minds and cut through the noise, and how are you framing it so that they're thinking about it? And then targeting is basically how you wrap that up and execute it. Think of it as your strategy, but strategy should be what not to do. So think about strategy that way, not what to do, but what not to do.
And when you think about stuff that's like what not to do, has your market, has your audience surprised you over time, for better or for worse?
It's pretty set, specific target market. I mean, we're hiring technical engineering type of people who are in energy projects all over the world and trying to find them their next role when that project does end. So it's a pretty specific demographic.
Okay, great, thank you. So one final question, and then I'd love to throw it over to the audience. Thinking about this, we prepared a little bit for this before we, had our conversation, and thinking through these kind of paradigm shifts with AI and automation, moving away from growth at all costs. As a senior leader in marketing, what's one piece of advice you would give to folks in the audience about thinking about their own strategies?
Oh, good question. I mean, things have changed. Our industry has changed. And so I think be creative is probably the advice I would give. Don't just do things the same way you've always done them because it's worked for 10 years, because our world's changing, our market's changing. And we did that at AirSwift. We've been backed by private equity companies as long as I've been there. But something we did new in the last couple of years is we went out to the Norwegian bond market and we listed our debt publicly. And that has helped us get some more cash that we wouldn't have otherwise gotten. We've done 3 mergers and acquisitions in the last 8 years. We've been able to grow a lot faster than we would have been able to do organically because we thought outside the box and we tried something different that none of our competitors have done. And now they're copying us.
So think outside the box, but don't get copied.
Be the first one to do
Yeah,
it.
be the first. Okay, great. Thank you. Thanks, Megan. Folks, we have some time for questions if anyone would like to ask or make a comment.
Yeah, so think of like a military general and the tactics they're using, and they're deciding where not to go to avoid getting attacked or things like that. It's similar in marketing. So I think a good example might be you can't appeal to every mass market, every person in the world. So maybe deciding who you're not going to target, for example, and really focus in on who's your ideal customer, and you might have to let some people go. Yeah, using it is a great way to remove bias that might be there in the human mind. So it's been helpful that we're really providing the best match in terms of resume and job description and keywords, and it's not looking at a person's name or anything else that might, give way to some sort of bias. So we've found it to be quite helpful in identifying what is actually the best candidate based on skills and ability. And we've hired in-house developers to build this for us, and it's been probably 2 years in the making. So we are learning as we go, but I think the best is yet to come.
Are you here to get us?
Can I follow up on that question?
Right.
No.
Just put that on your agenda.
So, actually yesterday I saw a post from Kieran Flanagan, who works in HubSpot, and on his podcast with Kip Butler, they were talking about AI being like a summer intern, right? Which is like you give the summer intern the task, and you don't give them any context, and then they come back and it's like, it's okay, but it's not great, right? Mm-hmm. But you don't tell them why it's not great. You just kind of send them off and do it again. They come back with the same kind of, level of quality. And AI is similar to the summer intern, where you have to train it, right? You have to teach it. You have to help it learn. That's the machine learning part of it. And particularly if you think about stuff like bias being introduced as well. Like, how do you guys think about that?
You won't get that reference, so yeah. What's that?
Can you say the last part of the question again?
Yeah, so I'm thinking like if you're creating your own intelligence to power your tool, are you training it?
Oh, yeah, we are. And it's not getting it perfect right now, to just be totally candid. That's why we're waiting and developing and testing and iterating. But we are testing it, training it, and providing the right input so that we get a better output.
Great.
So yeah, it's a work in progress.
Yeah.
So we actually did buy a product, and it ended up being not what we thought it would be. It was not fit for purpose. We tried to change it and mold it to exactly what we wanted to be, and in the end we just said, screw it, we're building our own. Like, this would have been easier and saved us a couple of years of trouble. But I think what we're doing at AirSwift is so specific. We're trying to find purple squirrels for clients, and it's just, we really needed our own product. And then since we're privately owned and constantly changing ownership every 3 to 5 years, we felt this would be a good way to increase our multiplier, make us more valuable, to have our own product in-house that we developed.
You want to start? I can go.
Either way.
I mean, it is, like I was describing a little earlier, it can be an evolving thing, right? Sometimes the thing you build is ideal for a UK customer, right? Like, they're here, they're in our market, we've built a tool in this specific language with this particular set of constraints around us. And sometimes it's as simple as that. Now, presumably you will have, the product appeals to a particular buyer or a particular industry, or, if there's a cost attached to it, who is likely to pay for it. But it can be really simple to start. The way that at HubSpot, but actually at every company I've worked in the past, identifying the ideal customer profile comes from what people tell you. Now this is like Steve Jobs won't tell you this, or Henry Ford wouldn't tell you this. It's like, you know, you can have any color as long as it's black. Like sometimes creators can be really, really opinionated about the thing they're delivering, but unless you're building the Model T or you're building the iPhone, then you probably have to listen to what customers and prospective customers are telling you. And so as you get those first few customers through the door, particularly at the very early stages, having really deep relationships with those customers so you can understand, well, what happens if this thing goes away? Like, how bad is that for your business if we're not here anymore? Like, what are the things they really value, not just the utility of the product or service that you're offering, and how do you build on that? And then increasingly, as you add customers to it, or maybe you're not adding customers because you're not serving that market, but people are knocking on your digital door, listen to that. Like, what is that telling you? You know, is there an opportunity for you to go after those other folks? And the great thing about data is that when you have enough of it, it kind of transcends bias. And bias in the, I thought that this was my customer, turns out it's not, right? The data tells me something else. And that's typically how I've seen it in my career, is that you continually listening to the thing. It doesn't mean, by the way, that you always follow the data. You might not want to build that thing. You might not have the capability to build that thing that's being looked for right now, but at least gives you some idea of what you should build around. And one last point I'll make, your ICP is probably going to change, right? Because you might build stuff and then open up a whole new audience that you didn't realize that you were attracting.
Agreed.
Anything else? We have 6 seconds. Rich.
I think you're right. You had an extra 5 minutes on the timer.
Okay, awesome. We have 5 minutes and 2 seconds.
I think thinking about them as the 2 or 3 big things that they're on your wish list. You really want to get them done. They're super important, and you just kind of have to accept that that's what's doable in 1 year. And then the next year you can pick another 2 or 3. But there's been statistics that show as you add more, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, you're less likely to achieve them with excellence or less likely to achieve them at all. So the point of having those 2 or 3 things, and they're not going to be small things, they're going to be big picture, big things. They should take a while to accomplish, but having it at those 2 or 3 just really keeps everybody clear and aligned on what they should be doing. And then you might have to block out time in your calendar too to just make sure that it gets done, and then you'll get to your emails or whatever it is later that's distracting you. But the point is to set aside the clear time and make sure everything lines up with that. So I'll give you an example. What we do at AirSwift is we have 3 strategic priorities every year, and they change every year. But everyone at the organization knows it. We talk about it every meeting. And then we have one marketing team goal, and that is aligned with one of those strategic priorities. And then from there, everyone on the marketing team has, 1 or 2 goals that line up into the team one. So it just trickles all the way down to where you're ultimately hitting that big picture wig, but you're each contributing to a different part of it. Does that help? Mm-hmm. So we track the number of new leads that come in. And what we're trying to do every year is increase the number of those that come in. And then more than that, like that's a top line vanity metric, I'd say. But the most important part is what flows through to the bottom line. So we track of those marketing qualified leads, how many became customers, how many then gave us job vacancies, and then how many of those did we fill, and then what was the GP from that. So we just loop that back, and then that way when we're having conversations with our CFO and it's budget time, we're saying, well, you gave us this and look what we did with it. And we have a hard number that we present to him and can say confidently, these are leads you wouldn't have gotten otherwise. They're in markets we wouldn't have broken into otherwise. So it's really transitioned the way the finance side of the business views marketing. So we're not just a cost center, we're a revenue driver.
Yeah.
Can I add a question to that?
Yeah.
So the famous 50% of my marketing works and 50% of it doesn't. I just don't know which 50%. Like, how do you deal with that with your CFO?
Well, we don't do a lot of the broader brand awareness pieces because of that. It's very hard to get approval. So everything that we're doing, we're making sure we can track it back and show the ROI on it from the campaign or from the ads or whatever it is that we're doing. But I do think you need to do both. You need long and short-term marketing initiatives to drive the brand growth, and then the short-term sales activations. So I wish we could do more.
Thank you. I think we had one here, or maybe not. Yeah, we've one hand here, and I think that would be our last question.
Is it Kerrygold?
It is Kerrygold, yeah. You know something like Kerrygold, right, as a brand, okay. So clearly passionate, right? I'll be telling you about my bank and my political party in a second, but like, Kerrygold was a master stroke in branding, actually, right? Kerrygold's the most, do you know where Kerrygold is the most popular brand? Like where it's bought most around the world?
Yes.
Yeah, United States, yeah. Master stroke in branding. Really cheesy, terrible TV ads back in the 80s made people living in the United States wish they were back in Ireland. And that's where it is now most popular.
I buy Kerrygold too. It's
Yeah,
great.
you see? Amazing. Okay, folks, thank you so much for the time today. Really appreciate it. Thanks, Megan.
Thank you.
That was great. Thank you.